Hi, Vernon.
Okay. Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Vernon.
Hi, Rowan. Hi, Rob. So, good afternoon, students. As you know why we're here. I sent out the notice for you with regards to the session. Basically your career as a lawyer, understanding a few pertinent aspects with regards to it and also how you can grow. So I am going to, because I won't be able to do proper justice to it, so I am going to be handing over to Mr. Rob Green, who will be introducing not only himself, but Mr. Rohan Bilimoria as well. It's an absolute pleasure to have them here and also to, share their insights. So I'm also looking forward to, hearing what they have to share. And yeah, students, so enjoy, take notes. And yeah, I'm handing over to Rob to do the proper introduction. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Vernon. Thanks very much, and thanks for those joining us as well. We're on a new platform for me here, so I'm used to Zoom where you can see people's faces, but I'm trusting that there's people out there. Thanks for joining us. I'm here in very rainy Cape Town, as most of you guys are as well. But we're obviously delighted to welcome Rohan to join us today, all the way from Sydney. We have to be careful of what time of the night it is on a Friday evening for him, but and I'll get to that introduction shortly. For those of you who may have been in one of our annual talks before, where we try to give people some advice regarding their careers in the law, they'll know me, but those of you who don't, I am Rob Green. I'm the CEO of GRM. We're based here in Cape Town. We also have presence in Hong Kong and in the UK as well. We specifically focus very much on legal research and legal recruitment, and we've been helping many thousands of lawyers at all stages in their careers over my near 20-year career in legal careers and legal recruitment. And I've been lucky enough to live on 4 continents and work in a number of countries. Now based here, and I think it's always incredibly useful to help law students with any advice that I can give them. As mentioned, we're delighted and a South African first to welcome Rohan Bilimoria, and I will hopefully do you justice, Rohan, with your bio. But you are an international attorney who's worked and lived in many of the markets that I have also been lucky enough to live and work in. You're currently in Sydney, Australia, but you've worked for Magic Circle firms, US law firms, and Fortune 500 in-house positions as well in London, Moscow, New Delhi, Singapore, Sydney, and Tokyo. You're currently working, I believe, for a Big 4 bank in Australia, but you've also worked for brands such as KFC and Pizza Hut, Asia Pacific, and also worked for Linklaters and Mayer Brown, which I'm sure the students on the call will know are some of the top firms in the world. You are the founder of Law Ninjas, which is an incredible platform and is growing and building globally all the time, which it was, and you'll be able to tell us more, obviously, as we go on, which was set up initially as a social network for in-house lawyers, but has then since then grown and become a really big hub and useful platform for law students as well. So we are obviously delighted to be able to, well, I was delighted to be able to be in contact with you. And then when we started talking about talks and webinars for students, and you'd said that you'd not appeared in South Africa before, I said, UWC, let's get it organized. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Well, I think what we'll do, because again, I'm conscious that the students, some of the students may have heard from me before, I wanted to just do a quick 1-slide presentation, just 3 areas what I believe that the students should, at any stage of their degree, or whether they're just starting out or whether they're looking to leave this year or next, can think about, and hopefully that will come up. Yep, there we go. And these are just going to be bullet points, but and I'll talk through them quickly, because then I think the students will really enjoy hearing from you. like I said, we're always here to help, and I'm always here, and I'm very easy to find online. You can find me on LinkedIn, Rob Green. I'll come up, you'll see me. Please reach out. Feel free to ask me any questions. I'm always, like I said, I've worked in this space for 20 years, and I'm always delighted to help students. So please feel free to reach out for me. But we're working in a market now, the legal sector, which is changing rapidly. I find, anyway, certainly from a career perspective. I think it's an industry that are a sector that took a long time to get going and moving and getting with the times, as they say. But it's now rapid, and I think Rohan will probably be able to give more exposure to and more detail on that, being that you're in that space where you're probably dealing with a lot of the technology companies and seeing what other law firms and law departments are doing. But I can tell you from a job perspective and from a career perspective, it's moving rapidly, and the skills are changing. Just to give you an example, pre-2010, the need for lawyers to be good business developers and salespeople wasn't even an issue. But now it's a big part of the role is to be able to develop relationships and network properly and that kind of thing. But the three areas that I think students can really be aware of as they go into their careers is, and I'm going to be looking at my other screen because it's slightly bigger on that. So if I'm looking that way, apologies. Number one is really taking every opportunity to build your experience. And that is, many of you would have been doing this already, but that's, taking every summer and winter holiday to gain any experience you can. Some of it may have to be unpaid. We've all been there where we had to do some work experience for unpaid, but it all beefs up the CV and all beefs up the LinkedIn profile and that kind of thing, and also helps you gather experience in some of the areas that you might think that you would be interested in, but maybe not once you've had exposure to it. So it all helps to frame your exposure to the market, but at the same time, when it comes to starting to apply for articles and starting to apply for jobs, you really, really need to have things on there that are discussion points. And people want to see that you've spent the summers and the winters gaining some experience. That could be legal related, or it could be non-legal related. It's just, have you been working? Have you been gathering experience? That could include job shadowing, spending time in law clinics, that kind of things. But one of the things that we've noticed as well as, over the years, more so is and I put there being a community leader. That's quite big, but really being active in your local community is also something that employers that we work with look for. Someone who's been active, not just in the legal market, but also within their local community. They look for people who've obviously really focused on doing well in their academics, but also have tried to pick up life experiences as well. Now, life experiences, we've been rather curtailed by COVID of the chances of traveling and gaining experience, but that could be, again, as I'm sure you're aware, I originally come from the UK, and in the UK, there used to be things like Duke of Edinburgh Awards and things like that, where people would be gaining experiences and courses and doing life experiences over the time that they were studying. So, and here, I'm sure there's examples of that similar that can be done, but it's what the reason why I put it down there is because this is what people look for in the CVs. Secondly, is I've put down a social profile, and this is sort of really centered around Facebook and, well, not so much Facebook, I suppose, these days, but more LinkedIn, your professional profile. It seems to be here to stay at the moment, and it's one of the areas that people jump onto straight away when they're looking at your CV and looking at whether they can bring you on for articles, and obviously they're going to be looking at a number of CVs. So those who have a full social profile will stand out. Now, that also, the beauty of actually a LinkedIn profile, and I was working on this with an experienced lawyer yesterday, is that it doesn't have to just be about what you've done. It can be about what you're interested in. Now, the example I'm just going to give you is the gentleman I was speaking to yesterday. He's very much an in-house commercial lawyer, corporate commercial lawyer based here in South Africa. But his passion is in the crypto space and fintech space. So we were working on marketing collateral articles. I was filming a podcast with him yesterday, talking specifically about crypto regulation. And all of that marketing collateral will enable him to brand himself and portray himself as and just show future employers what he's also interested in and not just what he's done. So that's what I mean by marketing collateral. This particular gentleman, I've suggested that he writes 4 blog posts on the LinkedIn profile, again, to beef up that collateral and make sure his profile stands out. I put network properly. This is something that I've talked about with students before. Just having 20,000 connections on LinkedIn isn't networking. Networking is communicating, really, reaching out to people as easy as if you read an article in a magazine that's written by a partner or a GC, write to them on LinkedIn and say that you've read it and you found it interesting. This is reaching out to people, communicating, building a network of people within the legal space. Signing up to newsletters, attending events, which are now obviously usually like this. They are virtual as opposed to in person, but go to the ones that are in person if they're not really expensive. But try to get along to events and sign up to newsletters. Keep on top of what's going on out there. Comment on it. Build your marketing collateral around your social profiles. And then the last point I put there was, don't expect things to come to you. Go out there and get it. And that's really much more about, there's so many events and so many newsletters and so much news out there that try to embrace as much of it as possible. And my phone's going off. Apologies for that. And really just go out there and get it and grab it, the bull by the horns. And the third bit before I go and I'm not going to go, but let Rohan speak. Apologies for going on. But really, and this is just a tip for those of you who at the sort of student, article clerk, candidate, attorney, newly qualified space, the people that have, you can see a genuine passion for the law market come shining through, and that can be in your social profile, your CV, how much experience you've been building up, the articles you've written, the publications you've done. Don't forget, back in the pre-LinkedIn, you would have had to been published in the Rebus or Without Prejudice here in South Africa, but you don't have to now. You can publish your own work on LinkedIn. So, that comes shining through if you've got a real passion for the law market, and you've got an idea of where it's heading. And Rohan will be able to touch on this more, but, and again, I'm going to get this stat wrong, but someone said to me before that there's more patents being filed in the legal space than any other industry across the world at the moment. The legal tech is taking off like you wouldn't believe. If there's a nice newsletter that I'm sure many of you already get called Artificial Lawyer. I get that every morning, and it comes through in my inbox. And the tech that's coming out in the legal space is amazing, and that newsletter, Artificial Lawyer, is actually very good because it shows you the law firms and the alternative legal services and the in-house guys and what they're signing up for and who they're using. And yeah, I suggest you sign up for that. Really get an idea of where legal tech is going, because then you'll know how it's going to affect your job when you are out there in the marketplace. I suggest you try, if you can. Obviously, I'm conscious of budgets, but if you can, budget for some research spaces, We have a subscription model called Nabi, which is easy to find on our website. Obviously, I'd love the whole world to be subscribed to that, but that's just one example of where market research into the legal markets across Africa, what's happening on the ground, research that you won't get anywhere else. If you can afford it, if you can put some of your monthly budget towards subscriptions, I'm not just talking about ours, but others, because there's lots of other subscriptions out there where you can get data for as little as a few dollars that others may not have. I suggest you do that. Again, there are Substack articles. I mean, we have one, and there's lots of lawyers and lots of legal professionals on Substack now. And well, we all know there's thousands and millions of podcasts out there. And that will all help you to network and connect with these podcasters, connect with leaders like Rohan, and that's going to, it's going to build your knowledge and your passion for the law market. So they're the three areas that I think you guys can be focusing on for now. And then I'd like to take this opportunity to hand over to Rohan, who's going to take us through Law Ninjas and some of his advice.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to Vernon as well for this opportunity. And hi, everyone. My name is Rohan Bilimoria, and I'm calling you from Sydney, Australia. As kind of Rob really kindly laid out, I've worked at law firms. I've worked in-house roles at companies. I have worked in a few places. But the most exciting thing I think I've done in my career so far is setting up a platform called Law Ninjas. And I set it up back in 2017. And the idea was to sort of just be a small WhatsApp group, actually, of in-house lawyers. Because I had just moved from being a law firm lawyer or a private practice lawyer to being an in-house lawyer at KFC and Pizza Hut. And so I set up this group because I wanted to ask all my friends questions about tax laws and labor laws and all the things you're meant to know when you're a lawyer inside a company. But when you're a law firm, you might not know those things. And then it just kind of took a life of its own. A lot of the lawyers started adding their friends and telling their friends. And now fast forward almost 5 years later, we're a community of a few thousand lawyers and law students around the world. We run a lot of webinars and workshops and events. Most of them, if not all of them, are free. This session that we're doing right now in collaboration with GRM Search, I think is my 50th webinar for law schools around the world. My first in South Africa, so very excited about that. And also we're launching an app in a few weeks' time, which all of you will be able to download for free, which will have a lot of resources on it. We're doing conferences and we're doing a lot of partnerships with other companies. And so when Rob started talking about legal tech, I got very excited because that's something I've been talking to a lot of legal tech founders in the last few weeks in India and Africa and elsewhere. And it is a very exciting space. So do keep an eye out for it and do start reading up on it because it is not just the future, it is the present. And so it's very, very dynamic place to sort of look into. So how this session, is going to run is if you have any questions at any time, please do put them in the chat and Rob and I will address them as we go or definitely when we have time at the end. This is meant to be interactive. This is meant to be candid. So don't be shy. I can see a question already, Rob, if we want to answer this one from Anastasia. So she said, what career jobs are there after you have done your articles? So maybe, Rob, you can answer that from a African or South African context.
Yes, yeah, I just saw the little red dot pop up as well. So thank you, Anastasia. It's a really good question because it's actually, I think there's more opportunity now for a law graduate than there used to be. And what I mean by that is that there used to be a very traditional path. You really would get your articles and then it was, you're going to hope that you're going to get into the best firm and gather some experience. But now the law degree and then articles after that allows you to go in so many different directions. And I mean, there's too many to list on this call, but there's legal research. I mean, the examples I can give you are the ones that I've seen and we've been involved in. We ourselves have hired article students or candidate attorneys into research positions. So we've had our Our research and consulting division has brought on researchers before, so that could be getting involved in business research for businesses, where we've done projects across Africa. It could be consulting work where we've consulted and helped the firm strategize. So that's again where we've used bright young candidate attorneys. I've brought people in as recruiters, so legal recruitment is also a role that can be looked at. There are lots of opportunities within. I hate to use the term journalism, but within that space of research and news, LexisNexis is regularly hiring across South Africa and other such. I don't know, would you call LexisNexis a publisher? I suppose you would. There are many opportunities arising across the legal tech space, and for those of us in South Africa, I implore you to start looking at the firms that are starting to grow in places like Stellenbosch, out of Silicon Cape. There's a lot of legal tech there. There's a lot of all of this can be found online, but there's firms that are growing up across the Western Cape that are focusing on the legal space. So legal tech is an area, or obviously you can also move up to Joburg. You don't have to stay here in Cape Town, but and the list goes on. I mean, surprisingly, actually, whereas overseas we often see, if you're going to stay in the law, then practice is really the only option after articles. What we see here more is there's more and more candidate attorneys being hired in post articles into in-house positions as well. In fact, someone recently who was part of our research team, who is a candidate attorney, got offered a job as a legal advisor, and she left us with our good wishes, obviously, and went back into the law. So I'm trying to give you examples there that there are a lot of opportunities. You just need to broaden your horizons and start thinking there on the as wide as possible. But for me, if I were in your shoes, maybe it's just my personal passion, but I would be looking into the legal tech space and seeing what's happening across the world, and with Africa being where it's positioned in terms of it being a growth market across the entire continent, that's where I would be putting my efforts.
Thanks, Rob. We've actually got a lot of questions in the chat now, and quite a few of them relate to what to do after your articles, or what kinds of jobs can a second-year student in South Africa get. So, would you like to address maybe one more, and then we can kind of leave them till later?
Yeah, no, I can go through them now.
Sure.
I'll go from the bottom up. What jobs can a second-year student get? I'm going to guess here that you're referring to what to build up your experience, because obviously you're still studying. Well, again, it really depends, doesn't it? I'm loath to say you should work for free, but back in the day when I was a student, and still now, if you can do 1 or 2 weeks of free paid work experience, it all helps, even if it's just 1 week. But obviously the ideal scenario is to get somewhere in during this winter, during the summer, and get a paid internship. But my suggestion would be to contact anything that's legal related, really, to gain any exposure, because the whole market works and is intertwined. Whether it's, again, I mentioned LexisNexis are always hiring, whether it's us and our platforms here, whether it's any single law firm across the Western Cape where you can get to easily by taxi or bus or your own car. And don't forget, there's 13,500 registered law firms across South Africa. So they're from one-man bands through to the big guns. Everybody is always looking for help. So if you're just looking to fill up the summers and the winters, then I would look at everything. And again, legal tech. But if you're going to go in and you need money and you're going to ask for big salaries, then they're going to be less inclined to hire you. What are the different job paths we could follow with a law degree, but without pursuing articles? That is a very good question. I still think a law degree I think it's an excellent degree. I think it can cross over into other areas. We've seen law graduates, with a law degree, I think you can, if they're looking for a student or a university leaver, then that's a pretty good degree to have. It really depends on what your passion is and what it's a hard one to say because, again, the Western here in Cape Town, all of the big financial houses and asset managers across the southern suburbs and down in the waterfront and Investec and all of those guys, FMB in the Portside Tower, they're always looking for bright graduates, and they're always looking for people who've done difficult degrees like law degrees. So it's quite a big question there from Iman. What job paths? It really going to be? The law degree is one of the best degrees to have. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've always thought that. And you, depending on what your passion is, you'll be able to find it. And don't forget as well, if traditional law isn't what you're looking for, there is a vast array of alternative legal services here in Cape Town. This is the hub for ALSs. So it could be Legalese, who are based on Badengracht Street. It could be Cognia, Radiant, and I forget the other, Lighthouse. Thank you, my colleagues just said. And there's a whole heap of others that are around that offer. Radiant is another one that offer this sort of connection of tech as well as alternative services, and they often do a lot of work for firms overseas. So again, that's an option, even without being a qualified lawyer. How does one see themselves working for a good law firm?
Rob?
Yeah, go on.
Rob, sorry, do you mind me just jumping in quickly? I think, would it be fine, just for strategic purposes, would it be fine if we maybe keep the questions for afterwards so that at least Rowan probably, can just get through his portion, if that makes sense to
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free.
No? Because I know students can sometimes shoot from the hip with regards to the question.
No problem. So I'm happy to answer questions as well. I might not be able to answer them from a South African perspective, but I can do it from an international one. I strongly believe.
No, sorry, Rowan. No, what I meant was if you could get through your portion of the presentation.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and then we could do the questions afterwards. Yeah.
Sure. So thank you everyone for all these questions. And I strongly feel that anytime I have a webinar or I attend a webinar where there's lots of questions, that's the sign of a successful one. I think engagement is really, really good. So keep those questions coming. Hopefully we'll be able to address all of them in our time. But if not, I'm sure Rob and we can sort of come back to you if you email them to us or if you send us a LinkedIn message. So this session, look, we could cover a number of topics, right? Usually in these webinars, I talk about a lot of things. I talk about like networking, as Rob kind of alluded to. I talk about how to write your CV, how to write your cover letter, what it's like to work at a law firm, what it's like to work in-house. But I think if we did that, we might be here for a while. So maybe I can just talk a little bit about some key concepts which you should be aware of when you're, I guess, pursuing your legal career, because some of you might be, in your first year, some of you might be in your final year. So you're all at different stages. And so you're all kind of under sort of different, I guess, pressures and different, you have different, I guess, knowledge as well as to what a legal career entails. So one thing I will say, which I think Rob also kind of alluded to on his slide, is I think it's very important to build your brand very early on. And so, for example, if you're interested in, I don't know, corporate and M&A law, then if I were you, I would start building your brand in that space. So what that means is using platforms like LinkedIn. And so if you don't have a LinkedIn account, by the way, I would highly recommend you open one by the end of the week. I think not only will it help you to understand what's going on in the world of law and outside the law, and in South Africa and elsewhere, but it also has a great jobs section where you can see what's there, what's going on. A lot of the jobs that I've gotten in my career have been through LinkedIn or meeting people on LinkedIn. So I think it's a really great tool. And so, yeah, I would say, get a profile and then start sort of, as Rob said, commenting on posts that you're interested in corporate and M&A law. Start sharing articles or writing original posts, just so that two things will happen, right? If you do it consistently enough and if you do it diligently enough, then firstly, people, when they think of corporate and M&A law, they'll start thinking of you, because they'll say, oh, I've seen that student or I've seen that junior lawyer on LinkedIn post a lot of interesting stuff about corporate and M&A law. Let me reach out to them because I'm looking for an intern or I'm looking for an associate for my team. So that can happen. And then the other thing that'll happen is when they reach out to you and you're able to then knowledgeably talk about a particular topic. And also, like, let's say you applied for a job and they see your name. It can happen where they say, oh, I recognize that name. It's somebody who's been really, really interested in corporate and M&A law, and I really want to get to know them and call them in for an interview. So key messages, I think you should start building your brand at this stage, because I think, unfortunately, not only do we live in a very competitive world where there's a lot of law students, a lot of lawyers in South Africa and elsewhere in the world, but also we're dealing with a global pandemic where things have gone upside down over the last few years. So the sort of more consistent, more diligent you can be on LinkedIn, on social media, I think will help you in the short term as well as the long term. One thing I will say, though, just building on what Rob said about networking, I feel strongly that, networking actually as a term, even when you say it, or at least during my career, whenever somebody told me to go network, it always had this very formal or, a forced connotation to it, because it was like, Rohan, go to that conference and hand out business cards and make sure you, meet lots of people and get us lots of deals, or, when I was at a law firm. So I think what I would love to sort of maybe propose, and it's a controversial message, but I'll say it anyway, is if we could remove this word networking for a minute and replace it with something that's called relationship building. Because I feel like at the end of the day, that is how you will get ahead in your careers and in life generally. It's not, you shouldn't be going to a conference or getting on LinkedIn and saying, oh, I need to just, say hello to that person, give them my business card, and then, walk away. Nobody hires their lawyer, or law firm that way. The way, most companies or most in-house counsels appoint lawyers is by, forming a relationship with them. So whether it's, going out for a meal or meeting them for a game of golf or whatever it may be. And so I think it's very important to build that relationship with the people around you, not only, the senior lawyers at law firms, but also your peers, like all these, 60 odd people who are in this room right now. You should be building relationships with each of them, getting to know them, because you're all going to grow through your careers together. Some of you will become lawyers at law firms. Some of you will become lawyers at companies. Some of you may do something completely different. So I went to law school here in Sydney. Let's say there were 100 students in my year. 50 of us became lawyers and are still lawyers, and the other 50 are doing something completely different. Some of them are working at banks as like financial consultants. Some of them became yoga instructors. It varies. But I completely agree with Rob that a law degree gives you this foundation to be able to do a lot of things. It's not just work at a law firm or work in-house or become a judge. It just opens up a lot of doors for you, because the one thing that a law degree teaches you that no other degree teaches you, in my view, is the way of thinking that we have. All of us, regardless of how far along we are in our degrees or in our careers, we all have a certain way of thinking that our law degree has kind of taught us, which is, I believe, it's a logical, you kind of, are a problem solver. If you spoke to somebody who's doing a marketing course, or if you spoke to somebody who's doing an operations course, they may not think the same way we do. So I think that's something that nothing and nobody can take away from you, and that's something you'll carry through for the rest of your life. So use your law degree as a foundation to build on, and keep keep your eyes open. Like Rob said, legal tech is this really exciting new space, which I think is going to be something that everybody is going to know about and talk about, in a very short amount of time in the future. Couple of years ago, legal tech was, at least in my view, it was kind of this fluffy concept, which I didn't really know what it meant. Now, I still don't know kind of all of it because it has so many different elements and aspects, but it is the present, and it's definitely going to be the future. So that's something to research and really look into after this webinar. So as part of that relationship building piece, the one thing I will say, and if you can take one quote from me away from this webinar, and unfortunately it's not an original quote, it was from Dale Carnegie, who has done a lot of writing and courses on public speaking, on communication. So Dale says that it is more important to be interested than it is to be interesting. So let me say that again. It is more important to be interested than it is to be interesting. And so what he means, and what I interpret it to mean, is in any interaction that you have with somebody in your professional world, or even in your personal life, a lot of us, and even I do this a lot, and I used to do it even more, is you kind of, talk about the things you're doing, or you talk about how cool you are and all the achievements you've done. And people on LinkedIn do this all the time, right? They say, look at me, I've won this award, or look at me, I've just got a new job. But rather than doing that, if we can just tweak our approach, and instead of focusing on ourselves or making ourselves look good, if we can be interested in the other person, or if we can be interested in our team, that will change your perception from other people, and also it'll change how you approach situations. So try it next time. The next time you're talking to somebody, be more interested in what they're saying than trying to be interesting yourself. So the way you can do that is by asking questions, actively listening, and sort of, not just saying yes, good, but sort of taking in what they're saying and sort of putting it back to them, or asking them to tell you more. And that's really, I think, really, really important for any kind of relationship building exercise. And so one thing I will say is that, and this is an original quote now, it is, if you're not visible, okay, so if you're not visible, you're invisible, okay? So that comes down again. So, you may go to a conference, or you may be in a classroom, or you may be on LinkedIn, but if you don't put your hand up, if you don't go and speak to someone, if you don't post something, or like something, or comment on something on LinkedIn, you're pretty much invisible. Okay. And that's not where I want any of you to be. I want you all to be visible, and I want you to build relationships, and I want you to build your brand. Okay. So that is where I would love all of us to be, focusing on and doing actively from going forward. And so I guess one thing I will say, if this is something the students on this call are interested in, a lot of people ask me, they're like, what is it like to work at a law firm versus what is it like to work at a company? Because those are sort of two sort of career paths, I guess, that are most common perhaps for a law student. So my take on it, and every lawyer you ask will have, I guess, different views, but my take on it is, at a law firm, you're typically, you join, you sort of, at least at the British or Australian law firms, you join, you get to experience, perhaps a couple of departments, you rotate through different teams, and then you usually qualify, you sort of get set into one department, whether it's banking or corporate or litigation or whatever. And so then as your career develops, you kind of become a specialist pretty much in that particular area of law. And so you're meant to be kind of the ace who knows everything about that particular area of law. However, when you go in-house, or when you work as a lawyer inside a company, you could be a specialist in intellectual property, or in, I don't know, corporate and M&A. but typically you're expected to be kind of like a Jack or Jill of all trades, because you're meant to know a little bit about everything, or at least know where to look if somebody asks you a question about something obscure. And so I think that's one key difference there. The other key difference about working at a law firm versus working inside a company is your clients, right? Because when you're working at a law firm, your clients are typically, if not always, external parties, right? They're companies, they're banks, they're, multinational organizations. And so you have to kind of keep that in mind, that you have to build relationships with people who are outside of your comfort zone. Whereas inside a company, your clients are not external stakeholders. They are your team inside your company, your marketing team, your finance director, your operations team. And so that is a very big difference there, because when you're as a lawyer inside a company, an in-house lawyer, you're very much part of the business. You're much closer to the business. Whereas at a law firm, typically you'll they'll say, Kimberly, this new deals come in. We have to help our client with acquiring this company. Please draft the sale and purchase agreement. Please draft the condition precedent documents and arrange for signing. And this is the sort of deadline, or this is the timeline. And so you'll see, that beginning of the transaction, you'll work on it really, really hard. And then once the documents are signed, typically, then you'll just move on to the next deal or the next matter you have to work on. So you never really get to see, in most cases, why that merger or that acquisition or that deal even came about before it came onto your desk. And then you won't really see how it was implemented after the documents were signed and your engagement was kind of finished. Whereas when you're in-house at a company, you have to, and you're expected to see it right from start to finish, if there even is a finish, because you have to keep working on these things even long after the documents have been signed. And so I think for me, when I moved from a law firm to an in-house role, that was the big difference. And I enjoyed it because I loved being closer to the business and seeing why things were being done in a certain way. Maybe, Rob, I'm just conscious of time. Maybe we can go through some of the questions now. Sure. And so if you have any that you'd like to address, because I think there's one from Kimberly where she says, are articles applied for 3 years before the year that you are supposed to do them in South Africa?
Yeah, I was just reading Kimberly's. I'm going to come back down to Sam's and Shazia's and the other ones, but Kimberly, I think that's a bit too soon. If I'm brutally honest, I'm pretty sure that the people I know that have been successful is more like a year before where they start talking. But if you start talking to firms 3 years prior, they're going to know that you're keen. They might remember your name in the future, but there's a good chance that the partner that you're talking to or the HR person might not be there in 3 years' time. So it might just be a little bit too soon. But again, it's no harm in connecting with the person on LinkedIn, commenting on one of their articles, or they might, if you're following the legal news, they may have been involved in a deal. You can congratulate them on an award or something. Again, the name recognition and building up that name. But 3 years is a little bit too soon. Sam's question there was, how does one see themselves working for a good law firm after completing articles? Is there capacity for one to grow whilst doing articles? Two questions in one there. The second part, is there capacity for one to grow while doing articles? Here in South Africa, that is the eternal issue. There's so many law firms, but at the same time, I've heard lots and lots of horror stories, really, of people having to cede their articles and move halfway through their articles to a different firm because the firm that they were originally with wasn't delivering anything. I think it's really, whilst I would implore you all to look at every type of firm, and don't write anybody off, because you can get good experience at a two-person law firm. In some ways, that experience may be even better because you might be getting involved in the actual work, Whereas if you're working for a firm with 500 lawyers, you might just be making cups of tea for about 2 years. But, and I don't mean that being flippant, obviously. But when you are, I've said this to students before, but when you're interviewing, just be really aware of what kind of work they're going to get you to do and what they're going to be asking you to do, because you really need to understand exactly what you're going in for, so that you can grow whilst you're doing articles. But I think you're going to find once you are, Sam, doing those articles that you're going to be busy. So if you get the right firm, you will grow within. The first part of your question, sorry, was how does one see themselves working for a good law firm after completing their articles? Yeah. I mean, hopefully what will happen is that you'll do your articles and they'll keep you on if you're happy to stay there. But it's all down to the questions you ask of the firm. What kind of work are they doing? What history of the deal? What's their deal history? Who are their client base? It's a two-way street. They've got to be able to deliver for you. What kind of work are you going to be doing? So it's possible, but just be careful of falling into a trap of working for a crummy law firm that isn't going to give you the experiences you want. There is another question from Shazia there. How does one become an international attorney after the article? Well, I have a lot of experience of moving people, but Rohan is an international lawyer who's moved around the world. So maybe you can answer that, Rohan.
Yeah, so Rob, I guess being doing a law degree in South Africa might be similar to doing a law degree in Australia, perhaps. And so from my perspective, how I sort of went overseas was I applied for what they call a training contract, which is what UK law firms typically offer new graduates or new lawyers. And what it is most of the big UK law firms, they offer this thing, which is a 2-year contract, and it's usually divided into 4 rotations or seats of 6 months each. So you get to experience different departments, in the firm. If the firm has offices in other countries, you can kind of move to another office of theirs. You can also do the 6 months, one of the 6 months sort of slots at a company, like in-house at a client of that law firm. So you can kind of experience quite a few different things. So typically, like that's how a lot of my friends from Australia kind of went to London and other places. And then what you do is you have to kind of go through that 2 years. You do a few exams, which are now called the SQE, which is basically like a qualification exam process. And then you become qualified as a lawyer in England and Wales. And then it becomes quite a lot easier to kind of move around, because a lot of the contracts and agreements that are negotiated globally, whether it's for corporate deals or banking deals or whatever, are usually governed by either the laws of England and Wales or by New York law. And so if you're qualified in one or both of those jurisdictions, you become a lot more, I guess, you can be more mobile and you can move around a lot more. So even though I, for example, worked in Moscow and Singapore and Tokyo, I am not qualified and I know nothing about the laws of Singapore, Tokyo, or Moscow. But a lot of international law firms have offices in these places. And so when I was sitting in Singapore or Moscow or Tokyo, I was working on documents and contracts governed by English law. So, it didn't make a difference where I was sitting, really. So I guess that if you want to become an international attorney, one way to do it is trying to get out to an international firm and going through the process I just mentioned. But another way, which I didn't do, but a lot of lawyers do, is they go and do an LLM or a Master's of Law. So, for example, I know a lot of Indian law students, for example, who want to go and work in the US or want to go work in the UK, but they can't sort of bridge that gap, or they haven't been able to get the right opportunity directly with the law firm there for, any reason. So what they do is they go do a Master's of Law in, the US or in the UK. and then they do the bar exam or the equivalent in that country, and then they're able to get sometimes, if they're lucky, they're able to get a job at a law firm in that country as well. So that's one way to kind of bridge that divide from where you are and where you want to be. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what you want to do, why you're doing what you want to do, and then figuring out what the best way is. So one piece of advice, if I can give it quite briefly, is it's 2 words, and this is advice for, whenever you're trying to figure out how to get from where you are to where you want to go. And those 2 words are look up. So what look up means in this sense is firstly, look at the people who are doing what you want to do. So for example, on LinkedIn, if you want to be a partner at a law firm in New York, for example, or in South Africa, then search for the profiles of partners at firms. Look for maybe 3 or 4 or 5, and see what is the path that they followed. What you'll find very quickly is that everyone's journey is different. Everyone's path is different, but there could be common trends or common aspects to those journeys. So for example, if you see all 5 profiles of those partners at law firms in South Africa, and you see, all of them have master's degrees, or all of them went overseas and then came back, or all of them have learned a new language, or whatever it may be, it will inform your decision as to how you perhaps might want to proceed and what ideas you can get to do what you want to do. So the first aspect of looking up is look at the people who are doing what you want to do and see how they got there. And the second thing the second aspect of looking up is actually speaking to the people who are doing what you want to do. That's obviously slightly trickier, but you'll be surprised. With Law Ninjas, I've been sort of talking to students. I've been talking to a lot of lawyers. A lot of senior lawyers around the world actually do want to give back to the next generation. They do want to mentor young students and lawyers, but a lot of them don't know either how to do it, or they don't have a platform to do it, or they, sometimes they're like, oh, I'm too busy, or I don't have the time. And so what I would suggest is, again, after you've identified what you want to do and why you want to do it, is looking at a few people who are doing that and then reaching out to them on LinkedIn. So sort of saying, for example, if you were messaging me, you'd say, hi, Rohan, I saw on your profile that you had worked at, a law firm in London. I'm really interested in working overseas and in banking and corporate law. Would you have 15 minutes next week for a Zoom call, right? So what you've done there is you've obviously been polite and respectful. You've sent them a message. You've told them that, this is what you're interested in and why you're reaching out to this person. And also you've imposed a very low barrier to entry by way of a 15-minute call. You're not telling them, hey, come meet me where I am for a coffee, or do this, or spend money. No, it's a 15-minute call. And look, a couple of things can happen, right? Either they'll do nothing and you won't hear a reply from them, which does happen. Shake it off, move on. Maybe they didn't see it, or maybe they're just too busy, whatever. Second option that they have is to just say no and reject you, which, a lot of people can do sometimes if they're, again, too busy, or they don't want to, take the effort of doing this. Or the third option, and this is obviously the ideal one, is they'll say, yeah, sure, why not? I'm free next Monday, let's chat. And so at the end of the day, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So you have to take those chances, and you have to keep, trying things. Because, I have a story I can tell if we have a little bit of time at the end, but I've faced so much rejection in my career that, it's tough. And I know all of us and everybody who's listening, and I know you've all been through rejection as well. The key thing is just to keep pushing forward and to believe in yourself. So anyway, Rob, I'll hand it back to you for
it's a good point you make there about the rejection side of things, and I think that sort of ties in nicely. Just listening to what you were saying there, I was also, at the time of listening to you, I was also looking at the questions that have come in, and Kimberly and Sam and Shazia have all asked around that sort of international, how do I get there? There's a number of things to say on that. first and foremost, is that there is no hard and fast rule, guys. We can't sit here and go, okay, you studied this module, you call this guy, and then he'll get you to London. That's not how it works. But I can promise you, as a man and a professional that has moved around the world, myself, Rohan's exactly the same, albeit in slightly different fields. If you want it to happen, you will make it happen. It was a massive driver for me to get international exposure, but other friends of mine didn't want that. So they're still in London there, and they are perfectly happy, but I wanted it, so I made it happen. So you will face rejection, you will face barriers and to entry. It could be visa issues, it could be employment issues, it could be whatever it might be. But if you want it to happen, you'll make it happen. The only thing I can tell you in terms of modules to study and things like that, it's not really a module aspect, but I can tell you from having employed lawyers into positions of research and consulting and recruitment here in South Africa, as well as in Hong Kong and in the UK and in the Americas as well. The difference here is, and it's something to be aware of, is that South African law students tend to be incredibly intelligent, incredibly bright, incredibly technical when it comes to the law. I obviously don't know, Vernon will be able to tell us how the degrees are sort of set out. You guys seem to know the law really well, like inside out. But where there is a slight lack when I interview these people is the commerciality and understanding the business behind the law. Because law firms are business. It's all dollars and cents, or rands and cents, if you want. It's all about what you charge a client, what is happening with their business. Do you know what's happening? Pick and Pay might be your business, be one of your clients. What are their sales like? What trials and tribulations are they facing with the unions? You need to understand their business, and it's that commerciality that you can add. If you go back to the beginning of this conversation, where Rohan and I are talking about you really understanding the market, sign up to the newsletters, go to the events, take an interest in what's happening in the legal tech space, and that will all add to your commerciality. And then when you are talking to someone from London or from New York or wherever it may be, they'll go, this guy knows his stuff. So that's the only bits I can give you on that front. But if you want it to happen, it will. I just wanted to jump in on the one question there by Jade, which was in terms of legal tech. Does that include cyber law? And then Kauthar also mentions cybersecurity as part of a law degree. I'm going to put them together. Legal tech, what I mean when I'm talking about legal tech, and Rohan might be different, but I'm not talking about cybersecurity and cyber law. I'm talking about legal tech it's in a whole industry now. It's software companies releasing, the one that always jumps into my head is Luminance, which is the software that can scan a corporate document in 0.09 of a second, whereas it might take a human 3 days to read. It's understanding how the legal market is taking this technology that is being invented, and obviously, as with all technology in all industries, not all of it is good or worthwhile. What are the best bits? Read those artificial lawyer newsletters that come through. Take an interest in that space. I don't mean cyber security per se. It's more the technology that's being developed to improve and speed up law. It's interesting because it will mean that the job of a lawyer, I think, will change, because it won't just be about the accuracy of reading the document. It'll be how you interpret that and use into the commercial sense for the client, and then also how you then spend the rest of your time helping them strategize. I think maybe, Rohan, you can disagree with me on this, because you'll know, but I think that the role of the lawyer, certainly the practice lawyer, is going to be much more strategic and consultative going forward, as opposed to actually doing the law, which is where you need that business now. So that would be one way of setting yourselves apart, guys.
Rob, can I just say something quickly, if you don't mind, if it's fine?
Yeah.
Incidentally, the word legal tech has been coming up, I don't know how many times on this webinar. I didn't want to mention anything, but I just got the confirmation that we're actually going to be having a legal tech talk on Monday, actually, because I was waiting for the link the whole time and I didn't want to jinx anything. So just for all the students who are online, Weber Wenzel is doing a talk with UWC in that regard.
Weber Wenzel actually used Luminance that I just talked about.
Yeah,
maybe
so
some of the students can ask them about that and how they factor that in with their work for their clients. That's a good one. Yeah.
So I just want to mention it. Sorry. On to you,
That's
Rob.
fine. And then, I'm just looking at the questions here. Cyber law, legal tech. We've answered those ones. And then there's a top one. Amongst all the fields you worked in with regards to the legal field, that's for you, Rohan. Amongst all the fields you worked in with regards to the legal field, which one was
the most difficult? I've worked at law firms. I've worked in-house. I've worked, in different departments. Ultimately, look, working at a law firm is pretty hard usually. Long hours, demanding bosses and clients, the whole deal. You get paid generally pretty well, so that's how they keep you. I think at the end of the day, I had quite a few friends who, although they were working hard and although they were pretty stressed and got a lot of pressures to deal with, they really loved what they were doing. And so for them, although yes, it was hard and they were in the office a lot, they really enjoyed it. And so that was, I guess, what made it less difficult. For me, when I was at a law firm, there were days that were good, there were days that were not so good. But for me, when I moved in-house to KFC Pizza Hut, that's when I really found what I really loved. I love food, and I love the law as well. And actually, at KFC, although I was a lawyer, I was a lawyer for 2 years in their team. I told them that, hey, I actually want to learn more about the business. I want to be doing more on the business side. And so they gave me an opportunity to join their marketing team. And then they gave me another opportunity to join their operations team. And it was the first time in KFC's history that a lawyer had ever done marketing or operations. And so I guess that also comes down to, that earlier question that we answered, like, do lawyers, what are the law career paths? To be honest, it's limited by what you and what your mind and what your creativity and imagination can do. So, I although I know nothing about, the theory of marketing, I don't have a marketing degree, I don't have an operations degree, but a lot of it, once you've done a legal degree and once you've done the law, a lot of the other stuff kind of, it's not rocket science. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question. But
can I just make a point there,
yeah.
very quickly, because you touched on something that just reminded me. And this is really big for students going forward in how you develop your career. Rohan just touched on there about moving out and getting to know the business really well. That's something that also happened to me when I left university. I worked in an M&A department of a listed firm in the UK. I then moved into their marketing department. And this is no word of a lie. I'm not making this up. The CEO at the time, and it was listed on the FTSE 100. So he was young. I think he was 40 at the time. So it was a young CEO on the FTSE. And I got 5 minutes with him before I left. I knew his secretary quite well. I said, can you get me 5 minutes? And I did get the 5 minutes. And I said, I've got one question. When I'm 40, how do I be a CEO of a listed company? Now, GRM isn't listed. But his advice was he said, you're in marketing, right? I said, yes. He goes, get out of marketing, get into operations, get into sales, get into every department you can and get to know the business inside out. So it when you were talking there, it's something that jumped into my head. And it's the same with you guys. Don't be, if your ambition is to have, well, you don't know what you want to be yet, but if you've got an interest in business, then your law degree will stand you in good stead, even if you don't want to be a lawyer. And sorry, there's a question there about the MBA.
Yeah.
Possibly.
So I don't have an MBA. A lot of lawyers I know don't have MBAs. But if you speak to lawyers who do have MBAs, they say, oh, yes, it was the best thing they've ever done. It allows them to speak the language of the business, which I kind of, I can kind of agree with, but it's not a must-have by any stretch of the imagination. Also, an LLM, like I said, a Master's of Law is not a must-have by any stretch of the imagination. I don't have an LLM. So all I have is an undergraduate law degree. And I also have a finance degree, but that's because in Australia, you have to do law with something. You can't do law on its own. And so, an MBA would be good if you really want to get into the business side and really, get into the nitty gritty, but it's definitely not a must have.
And it depends on where you do it as well. I mean, I've got friends who have done their MBA, and they say it's usually about the quality of the MBA. It depends on the quality of the network you then build within the course, and that kind of thing. But like you say there, Rohan, it will teach you the language of the business, but there might be other ways that you can learn that as well. So it's not a prerequisite to having a big career. But again, it's part of the journey of learning about the businesses that you are serving or that you're working in. So potentially, I think it could potentially help. I've gone through all my notes. I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hope we've answered all the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think so.
Me or Rob, and we're more than happy to help. And I think look, again, I could keep talking about different things and how to build relationships and how to be a good leader and all those things. But I think at this stage, the key message, at least from my side, build your brand, get on LinkedIn, start seeing what's going on out there, become familiar with not just the traditional areas of law like banking and corporate, but start reading up about, as like Rob said, legal tech, cryptocurrency, AI, NFTs, environmental and social and governance, which is called ESG, which is a hot topic, data privacy and data protection. So data privacy, data protection, cybersecurity. There's just so much new stuff going on out there. And if you can, like I said, create a brand for yourself in a space where it's not already saturated with so many lawyers professing to be experts in it, that could hold you in good stead going forward. And so,
can I just jump in there, Ryan, just because before I forget, you just mentioned there about some of the areas that are growing and they're not going anywhere. The data privacy, cybersecurity, they're just going to grow. ESG is an industry in itself that is growing, and I can see from LinkedIn that people are getting jobs in that ESG now. And one of the things that we do is we've now factored the ESG and carbon credit scoring into our strategies for our clients who are maybe even small law firms, because it's going to affect every single firm and their supply chain and procurement and their scores and who they operate with. So it's affecting everyone. But if you want to, I just wanted to give an example of how life is changing regarding technology. We and I won't go into too much detail now, but we're moving into a partnership for legal jobs, which I'm going to make everybody aware of one day, where we're moving our contingency recruitment to a partner out of the US called Umbi. They haven't launched yet, but they're building the entire career journey on the blockchain, on Zinfen blockchain. So the idea is that there's much more verification that can go through in terms of the articles you've done, where you've studied, the work you've done. And so the future of one's legal career even is going to be on the chain. So the more you know about that and what it actually means, and all the stuff that we're learning about ICOs and things like that, and NFTs, it's a bright future and it's an exciting future as well.
Agreed. And so I don't know how much time we have, Vernon, but maybe could I sort of end at least my bit with a story, which might take a couple of minutes for me to tell?
No, that would be absolutely fine, please.
All right, thank you. And again, like I said, look, if anybody has any questions after this, or you think of something tomorrow, please feel free to message us and add us on LinkedIn. Let me tell you a story, and this is the one that kind of changed my life, I guess, forever, or my career at least. So when I was in my second last year of law school, so in Australia it's 5 years, so you have to do law combined with something else, so the whole thing takes 5 years. So when I was in my fourth year, I was seeing all my friends applying for jobs and applying for clerkships and internships and things like that. And so I thought about it, and I was like, I don't really want to stay in Australia. I want to go overseas. I want to do something different. But nobody had come to my university and told me how to work in an overseas jurisdiction. Nobody had conducted a webinar, and so I had no idea what to do. So I did something slightly crazy. I took out my computer on a Saturday afternoon, and I typed out a very basic cover email, which said essentially, "Dear XYZ, my name is Rohan Bilimoria, and I would like to apply for an internship at your law firm this summer. My CV is attached. Kind regards, Rohan." Worst cover email in the world. Please do not ever write a cover email like that. But again, I had no idea what I was doing, so I just did whatever I thought was the best approach. I attached my CV to it, and I sent it, and I'm not joking when I say this, I sent it to 100 law firms around the world. Now, out of those 100 law firms, I guess, I could ask you how many do you think, said yes, or how many do you think replied, but I'll given our time, I'll just cut to the chase and I'll say zero said yes. I got rejected 100 times in the space of a few days, and I can assure you it was not great for my ego or my pride. And to be honest, I didn't feel very good about myself or, my sort of career at that stage. However, there was one response I got out of those 100 law firms, one response I got where the person in this law firm said, "Thank you, Ron, for your email. We've seen your CV that you've got some litigation experience at a small law firm in Sydney as a paralegal. We unfortunately do not have a litigation department in our firm, so you might want to apply elsewhere." Okay, so it was a very polite rejection, I guess. Now, whenever you face a rejection, I feel like you have 3 or 4 options in front of you. The first option is you do nothing, right? You just kind of say, "Oh, okay, they've rejected me. I'm just going to move on with my life, shake it off." The second option is you send that very polite kind of response saying, "Oh, thank you so much for considering my application. I will, take your comments into consideration. Kind regards." The third option, and this is the one I feel like we should all adopt, and this is the one I adopted in that situation, is to ask for what you want or fight for what you want. And so what I did was I replied to that law firm and I said, "Thank you so much for your email. I agree that I only have litigation experience at this stage. However, my interest and my passion lies in corporate and mergers and acquisitions. And I believe that an internship at your law firm will be not just a small step, but a giant leap towards achieving my vision of being a corporate lawyer one day." So I threw in some Neil Armstrong, Man on the Moon language in there to jazz it up. 2 days later, the person replied and said, "Thank you so much. We'd like to offer you a 4-week internship at our law firm. You'll have to pay for your own flights. You'll have to pay for your own accommodation. We'll pay you a very basic salary. Take it or leave it." So I said, "I'll take it." And so I flew from Sydney to Singapore on a budget airline because I couldn't afford anything more. I stayed at the YMCA in Singapore, which I can assure you is not the Grand Hyatt. And I earned a very basic salary. And that firm was called Linklaters. And as a result of my 4-week internship with them, they gave me opportunities in all those other places that I mentioned. So I guess the key message, or there's 2 morals to that story. The first moral to that story is that you, me, everyone else in the world, we're going to face rejection at every single stage of our professional lives and our personal lives. It's going to happen over email. It's going to happen in conversations. It's going to happen over WhatsApp. And it's going to keep happening. But if you have done your homework, if you have figured out what you want to do and where you want to be and where you want to go, then you just have to keep believing in yourself and you have to keep pushing forward. Never let anyone else dictate how you should lead your life or how you should craft your career. So you have to keep believing in yourself and you have to keep pushing, and you will be rejected, but you will get that opportunity and things will happen for you. That's the first moral of that story. The second moral of that story is that one message you send, one email that you send, one webinar that you attend can change your life forever. And so at the end of the day, like I said, early on as well, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So just take chances, roll the dice, and never think twice about it.
Perfect. I think perfect way to end. And you also, I think, answered Kimberly's last question as well. That's brilliant. That's a lovely story.
Thank you so much, Rob. And thank you so much, Vernon, for this opportunity as well.
Thank you, 100%.
Everyone. So if there's no further questions, Rob, there's no more questions, right?
No, that was, I think Rohan's story is a perfect way to end, and it kind of answers Kimberly's question about So I just want to say thank you again, Rohan, taking the time out. I don't know what time it is there. Middle of the night.
Middle of the night.
10:15. Yeah, it's not too bad.
10:15.
Brilliant.
So just want to say thank you again for making the time and sharing your wisdom and insights. And it is true, one never knows, which webinar or what you do. You don't know, how it can change, for the better, for lack of a better phrase or lack of a better word. But thank you so much again, and Rob as well. Thank you for putting us in contact. It's
my pleasure, and it's an absolute delight to be in touch with Rohan and then to be able to have the chance to bring him, sort of, albeit virtually, to South Africa as well. So, UWC, you're a great bunch of people, great students, great facility, and great university. So it's great to have Rohan speak to us today.
Yeah, and it's always helpful, and it really goes a long way for students to not know only what's happening locally, but internationally. It's such a big thing because it is really about opening up one's the perspective is quite wide, and so locally is just local. But one's perspective really does open up if one, attends these sorts of webinars and gets more information. So thank you once again. We hope you have a good Friday. Rohan, you're probably gonna go rest now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Rob, thanks. We'll keep in touch.
My pleasure.
Thank you
Brilliant.
again.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.